Hey, it's going to be the most important breakdown video. I consider this the most important part of the two congressional inquiries. This is from the Joint House inquiry, and Carl Levin is the panelist. And I've done a whole podcast based upon just this part of the Joint House inquiry, and as well as other questions from Carl Levin as well. And this is the most important because here are the three directors of the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI. And what you're going to hear is some really damning information regarding how the CIA mishandled information intentionally, keeping it from the FBI regarding two al-Qaeda operatives. And let's get right to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, let me thank both our chairman and our vice chairman for their steady and their determined leadership of this effort, and also add my thanks to Eleanor Hill and her staff for their extraordinary effort. Mr. Chairman, after months of investigation and numerous joint inquiry hearings, both open and closed, a fair reading of the facts has led to a deeply troubling conclusion. Prior to September 11th, the U.S. intelligence officials possessed terrorist information that, if properly handled, could have disrupted, limited, or possibly prevented the terrorist attacks.
You don't say.
At crucial points in the 21 months leading up to September 11th, this intelligence information was not shared or was not acted upon, and as a result, numerous opportunities to thwart the terrorist plot were squandered. I've put up here a blue chart and handed to each of you copies of those charts, which track two of the hijackers, al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi, who were the hijackers of American Airlines Flight 77, which attacked the Pentagon. I understand from Mr. Mueller's prior testimony of September 25th that the travel of the 12 terrorists who constituted the, quote, muscle, close quote, for the 9/11 hijackings may also actually have been coordinated by al-Mihdhar. The charts contain in chronological order well-established and well-known facts. The backdrop is that we know that in 1998 the CIA had essentially declared war on bin Laden and on
George Tenet, the director of the CIA, actually stated that he was at war with al-Qaeda in response to the embassy bombings in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, in Kenya.
al-Qaeda. Then in December 1999, there was a heightened state of terrorist alert due to the Millennium celebration. That was the environment in which the failures occurred. An intelligence report was sent to the CIA and the FBI, identifying 4 al-Qaeda operatives with links to the East African U.S. Embassy bombings, and stating that they were planning to meet in Malaysia. The Malaysia meeting was of significant importance, so much so that not only was the FBI notified, but the director of the CIA was briefed about that meeting on numerous occasions. The CIA monitored the meeting in Malaysia, which took place from July 5th to July 8th, 2000, 20 months before September 11th.
Actually, January, made a little mistake there, from January 5th to January 8th of 2000. Now, a little bit of backdrop on that. The CIA became aware of this because the NSA, who was monitoring bin Laden's satellite phone, heard about, saw that a number was repeatedly contacted and calling bin Laden's satellite phone. And this number was linked to a house in Yemen, in the capital of Sana'a. The person who owned this house is Ahmed al-Hada. He's an associate of bin Laden from the Soviet-Afghan War in 1979. This house in Yemen basically became a global communications hub for al-Qaeda. For example, al-Qaeda operatives in Pakistan, in Egypt, and Saudi Arabia didn't want their phones to be, their phones were monitored by the government. They didn't have regulations like the United States had in place. The government can't hear your phone calls. That is until after 9/11. So they would call this house in Yemen and relay messages to al-Qaeda operatives all over the world if need be, with the contact of certain somebody. And that this would basically be the, because Yemen government is a little bit corrupt, it's known to be a country that harbors terrorism as well. So this became a global communications hub. Well, in December of 1999, the NSA heard a phone call between a person named Khallad, who is known as Tawfiq bin Attash. He was talking to a person named Khalid on the phone. This person would turn out to be Khalid al-Mihdhar, one of the hijackers of American Airlines Flight 77. And he told Khalid that him and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and his brother Salim al-Hazmi are to attend a summit in Malaysia. And the summit would have all the leading terrorists in the world at it, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Tawfiq bin Attash, Ridwan Samudin, also named as Hambali, Fahad al-Kuso. And these are people that would engage in terrorist acts such as the East Africa bombings, the USS Cole bombing, the Millennium Plot, and of course 9/11. So the NSA learned about this, and they told the CIA and the FBI to conduct human intelligence, because the NSA doesn't do that, in the hopes that they would get photographs of the people's names that the NSA knew so they could put a face to the name. But the CIA, much like all the intelligence services in the United States, doesn't share information with each other, not all of it anyway, which they should, just the pertinent information for reasons unknown. But that's how the CIA became aware of this meeting in Malaysia. So the CIA told the Malaysian authorities to make sure to take photographs of the people coming in and out of this meeting, and they did. And those photographs went to the Bin Laden issue station, codename Alex Station, which its chief of station, Michael Scheuer, was running, and also to the Counterterrorism Center, in which the director was Kofor Black.
And as a result of the monitoring, the CIA learned some important information. On January 5th, the CIA knew the full name of one of the attendees at what they knew was an al-Qaeda operatives meeting. His name was Mihdhar.
By the way, the NSA never told the CIA or the FBI the full names of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, but the CIA knew the full names because they took photographs of the passports of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and that's how they found out that they had also dual U.S. visas, and they were coming to the United States.
The CIA also had his passport information, including a multiple entry visa for the U.S. Our staff has concluded that that information was not distributed to the FBI, but there's some dispute about that.
No, there isn't.
On January 9th, the CIA learned the full name of Hazmi, another attendee at the al-Qaeda operatives meeting, and learned that Hazmi had left Malaysia on January 8th with Mihdhar on the same flight, seated together.
And with them was,
with this information,
by the way, with them was Tawfiq bin Attash, Khallad, but he was using a nom de guerre, a different name. So the CIA knew about this, but they didn't know about Tawfiq bin Attash being on this plane. Now, at the time, the chief of the Bin Laden issue station in 1999 was Richard Blee and not Michael Scheuer. Richard Blee held an important principals meeting in August of 2001 and basically didn't share even then whether these two men were inside the United States, that they had U.S. visas, but that they were inside the United States, and he didn't know where. But they did know where.
State of concern, this high-level state of concern and a declaration of being at war with al-Qaeda, the CIA did not put either Hazmi or Mihdhar on the watch list.
That's another. Why?
And again, according to our staff conclusion, the CIA did not tell the FBI all that the CIA knew, including that Mihdhar had a multiple entry visa to the U.S. I want to first focus, Mr. Tenet, on the question of the watch list, which you've talked about in your testimony. What reason specifically here? I don't want just a general answer here that there was a lot of workload and so forth, but what reason was given specifically by the CIA person responsible for putting that name on the watch list as to the failure to do so?
For not putting the name on the watch list. Our judgment is in talking to everybody working at the time that there were uneven standards, poor training, and we didn't
For
give
that
them,
specific failure?
Amazing.
All those reasons for that specific
yes, sir,
failure?
we did not. Everybody, the people involved, or people who have access, who we've talked to, acknowledge that there were uneven practices, bad training, and a lack of redundancy. The fact that they were swamped
That's not
does
true.
not mitigate the fact that we didn't overcome that with either redundancy, a separate unit, or better training.
Have you identified the person or persons who are responsible to put that name on the watch list?
We know who was working this case.
Person working this case is Michelle Ann Casey, who's a CIA analyst at the Bin Laden issue station that was the lead analyst of investigating the Yemen al-Qaeda Global Communications Hub. And she would know because she's tracking Khalid al-Mihdhar Nawaf al-Hazmi, who left his house and went to the meeting in Malaysia, who came to the United States. Who else would it be, right? And we could thank Ray Nowosilski and John Duffy for their remarkably groundbreaking work. Their podcast, Who is Rich Blee, is considered by me the most important 9/11 podcast in history. They're the ones who released the public names of Michelle Ann Casey and Richard Blee, and later Alfreda Ann Bukowski, or else we would not have known who these people were and what their job capabilities were at the Counterterrorism Center. And we could be thankful for them.
My question is, though, do you know the name or names of the persons who are responsible for putting those names on the watch list? That's my question.
Yes, sir, I think I have.
All right. Now, then we come to March 5th, same year, 2000. And the CIA learns some additional information, very critical information. On March 5th, the CIA learns that Hazmi had actually entered the United States on January 15th, 7 days after leaving the al-Qaeda meeting in Malaysia. So now the CIA knows Hazmi is in the United States, but the CIA still doesn't put Hazmi or Mihdhar on the watch list and still does not notify the FBI about a very critical fact. A known al-Qaeda operative, we're at war with al-Qaeda, known al-Qaeda operative got into the United States. My question is, do you know specifically why the FBI was not notified of that critical fact at that time?
The cable that came in from the field at the time, sir, was labeled information only, and I know that nobody read that cable.
But my question is, do you know why the FBI was not notified of the fact that an al-Qaeda operative now was known in March of the year 2000 to have entered the United States? Why was the CIA, why did the CIA not specifically notify the CIA? That's my question. The FBI.
Sir, if we weren't aware of it, when it came into headquarters, we couldn't have notified them. Nobody read that cable in the March time frame.
Wow.
So that the cable that said that Hazmi had entered the United States came to your headquarters, nobody read it.
Yes, sir, it was an information-only cable from the field, and nobody read that information-only cable.
Should it have been read?
Yes, of course, in hindsight.
And should it have been read at the time?
Of course it should have been read.
All right, my question is, do you know who should have read it?
I don't know that, sir.
George Tenet committed perjury here, and it's unbelievable that this is not on front page news at the time or at any time. This is incredible. Lying straight up at the congressional inquiry, at the joint inquiry. Over 50 agents read that cable. This is coming from Lawrence Wright, the author of The Looming Tower, James Bamford, Body of Secrets, Ray Nowosilski and John Duffy, The Watchdogs Didn't Bark, Kevin Fenton, Disconnecting the Dots, the leading experts in the world. And later on, Richard Clarke even confirms this in his interview with Ray Nowosilski and John Duffy. And he's the director of the National Counter Terrorism Division under the Clinton and Bush administrations. National Security Council, excuse me. So you would think that it would be read by Tenet, Cofer Black, Director of Counterterrorism Center, James Pavitt, Director of Operations, Tom Wilshire, the deputy chief of Alex Station, Richard Blee, the chief of Alex Station, John McLaughlin, CIA. Yeah, a lot of people in the CIA read this, and the important people did. That's because they're surveilling the most important target in the world at the time, which is at that time was the most surveilled house in the world, the Al Qaeda communications hub. So Tenet lied, and the person, he's lying straight right here. It's amazing. Not 9/11 Truth Movement, love to blame the government for things related to 9/11. Well, here it is. How come no one talks about this?
But I can find
Was
that
somebody responsible to have read it?
Well, there are a group of people. Somebody should have read it. Yes, sir. We need to also look at where it came into, but I can find that out.
You don't know who that person was?
I do not.
So notice how he looked away, sign of being deceptive.
Should they have been watch listed at the time, both of them? Now we're talking March of the year 2000.
Yes, sir. We've acknowledged that fact.
Okay. Do we know why in that specific time? Now we know that Hazmi has entered the United States. This is another trigger point.
Yes, sir.
They should have been watch listed. Who was responsible for watch listing at that time?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I will provide it.
It would have to be one or two people, I would think. And that's Cofer Black, the director of counterterrorism, or James Pavitt, the director of operations. I think one of them would be.
Answer.
Next, on October 12th, 2000, bin Laden operatives attacked the USS Cole. The FBI, which investigated that attack, learned that a bin Laden follower, Khallad, was the principal planner of the Cole bombing, and that two other participants in the Cole conspiracy had delivered money to Khallad at the Malaysia meeting.
Yeah, one of them was Fahad al-Quso, and the other I'm not too sure.
FBI told the CIA about those facts. That information came from the FBI to the CIA.
Levin showing the hypocrisy of the FBI and the CIA, right? The FBI investigating the Cole bombing tells the CIA everything it knows about that case, but the CIA, who's investigating the Malaysia summit meeting and the house in Yemen, doesn't tell the FBI everything.
CIA went back, reviewed the facts that they had about the Malaysia meeting again. And as a result of that review, in January of 2001, the CIA determined that Khallad had actually been at the Malaysia meeting and that Mihdhar and Hazmi, then, they knew, you knew, had been involved with the planner of the Cole bombing. Actually been
Khallad,
with the planner
Tawfiq bin
of the
Attash.
Cole bombing at the Malaysia meeting. CIA again failed
Shaking your head for it, idiot.
to put either Hazmi or Mihdhar on the watch list or to notify the FBI that Hazmi was in the United States. And my question is, do you know who was responsible for that failure?
Sir, can I take you back on
Sure.
the facts for a moment? First of all, in terms of the identification of Khallad, actually it was the FBI who provided the information to us because we were in a joint meeting at the time at a third country because we were running a joint case
That's
with somebody
evidence.
who
That has
identified
nothing to do with the
Khallad.
question.
And indeed, in January of 2001, the legal attaché from this third country writes messages to both our headquarters that after having been shown the surveillance photos of Kuala Lumpur, he made an identification of Khallad.
I think that's
So
it.
at that point, sir, both the CIA and the FBI know that Mihdhar was in Malaysia and that in this time period, and that
That's
Khallad was in
nothing to do with the
Malaysia
question.
at this time period as well.
Now that's irrelevant to my point. What you did not notify the CIA of at that point,
No, the FBI.
excuse me, but you did not notify, thank you, the FBI of at that point, is that you knew that Hazmi was in the United States.
That's correct, sir.
That's January now of 2001, another failure.
Sir, there are three instances, as I note in my testimony, on three
my
separate
question,
occasions.
I know. My question, do you know who was responsible to notify the FBI at that time?
I don't, but I will find out for you.
He doesn't know anything.
Now we have a meeting in the year 2002 in New York City. And this is a meeting of a CIA analyst and FBI officials from the New York field office which was the office investigating the Cole bombing.
Let me give context here regarding these two meetings. The first meeting was in June of 2001. So you have FBI agents working at the Bin Laden issue station, which is a CIA station, virtual station, that involves members of the FBI, the NSA, working together, sharing information, what they can about Bin Laden and al-Qaeda all around the world, sharing all information. But as we come to conclusion, that's not the case. Anyway, an FBI agent working out there named Margaret Gillespie is told by Alfreda Ann Bukowski to go to Washington, D.C. with these photographs. And these are photographs of Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Tawfiq bin Attash Khallad, who were attending the meeting. However, Alfreda Ann Bukowski doesn't tell Gillespie who these people were. And this is a classic fishing expedition. She tells Gillespie to go back to Washington, D.C. and meet with your officials, your superiors, and see if they know who these people are in the picture. Now, why would the CIA be doing this? Because they want to know at that point whether the FBI knew who these people were. Because if they didn't know who they were, that means that they're monitoring them in the country, right? Gillespie goes there, meets with Dina Corsi and Steve Bongard, whose names aren't mentioned here. They're redacted, right? But she shows them the pictures. And they're like, well, who are these people? And she goes, I don't know who these people are. Do you know who they are? And now they're like really suspicious of her. How do you not know who these people are? How do you not tell us who these people are? Because she's telling them that she doesn't know. Well, why'd you come here thinking that we would know if you don't know? And there's a big argument. But this causes discord within the agency as well. Was this the CIA's idea as well? I don't know. Well, a month later, in July of 2001, a CIA analyst out of the Counterterrorism Center, who was given orders by Tenet to not share information about who these people were in the photographs besides their names. And so Clark Shannon goes and meets with Dina Corsi and Steve Bongard and somebody else, I don't know who that was, and shows them these pictures and Steve Bongard says, why is the CIA monitoring these guys? And CIA and Shannon says, I'm not allowed to tell you that. But I can tell you that this is Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and they have Saudi passports. But what Shannon doesn't tell them is that they're in the country and that they have U.S. visas, or that they have connections to the planner of the Cole bombing, in which the FBI is investigating. And by that time, guess who's working with the FBI as a liaison officer? That's right, the person who intentionally withheld information from them regarding both Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi coming into the country, Tom Wilshire, who's helping them with the Cole bombing. You can't make this up.
And the FBI headquarters, including the FBI analyst on detail to the Counterterrorist Center at the CIA. The FBI agents on the Cole bombing pressed the CIA at that meeting for information regarding Mihdhar and the Malaysia meeting, but the CIA representative denied them that information. It's a very specific finding in the staff report that there was a refusal to share that information relative to Mihdhar and Malaysia, and as to why the CIA was tracking Mihdhar at a June 2001 meeting on the specific request of an FBI agent in New York. My question is, do you know why that CIA agent refused to tell the CIA agent what the FBI, what the CIA, let me start over. Do you know why the CIA agent refused to tell the FBI agent what the CIA agent knew when the FBI agent specifically said, why are you tracking Mihdhar?
We have, we're going to have a disagreement on the facts here. And here are the facts as I understand them. There were 3 people who left New York to go to Washington to go to New York that day. It was an FBI analyst from FBI headquarters, an FBI analyst from our counterterrorism center, and our analyst. They went up to discuss the Cole investigation. The FBI analyst from FBI headquarters brought the surveillance photos with her. And at the end of the conversation, and I've now talked to two of the people involved, Senator, the FBI analyst from FBI headquarters handed the surveillance photos to the New York field office personnel. There was some discussion about them. Indeed, they were talking about different people. Mihdhar was not who they were talking about in this meeting. When I asked our person at this meeting as to whether he was specifically asked about Mihdhar and Hazmi, he has no recollection of the subject ever being directed to him or ever coming up. So there's a factual issue here, and I've only talked to two of the people involved.
Let me read you the staff report. The CIA analyst.
So Clark Shannon actually gave closed-door testimony to the Joint House inquiry and said to them that he was authorized by Tenet not to share information with the FBI regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Watch.
Who attended the New York meeting acknowledged to the Joint Inquiry staff that he had seen the information regarding al-Mihdhar's U.S. visa and al-Hazmi's travel to the United States, but he stated that he would not share information outside of the CIA unless he had authority to do so. That's what he told our staff. Do you disagree with that?
Sir, I've talked to him as well.
Do you disagree that he said that to our staff?
Well, no, I don't disagree. He said it to your staff. I'm telling you what
Did he
told.
tell you something differently?
Yes, sir. He gave me a different
So
perspective.
he told you and he told our staff something differently.
Well,
okay.
But I think it's important, sir.
Tenet's lying here, by the way. So one thing is this. Imagine you're an analyst at the CIA Counterterrorism Center on behalf of George Tenet, the director, and basically lying to the Joint House inquiry, saying, I got orders from Tenet not to share information. He would be fired, right? Because he's actually telling a lie. But that's not what Tenet said. What did Tenet say? He said, that's not what, he told me something different. Well, what was it? What was different about it? Because if he's telling Tenet something different and he's telling the Joint House inquiry something different, well, what is that something different? That would mean that Tenet is lying because Tenet basically told Shannon not to share that information with the FBI, which makes sense because according to the previous discussion they had a month earlier, even Margaret Gillespie was told nothing about the people in the pictures, and the CIA knew who they were. They knew. So there is an intentional withholding of information from the FBI, and this would line up to what Clark Shannon told the Joint House inquiry under oath. He told the truth. Tenet's lying right here. Again, perjury.
Yeah, but our time is limited, so let me just keep going. That's the answer. He told you something differently from what he told our staff. Mr. Mueller, Director Mueller, at that June 11th meeting, did the FBI know that Mihdhar and Hazmi were at the January 2000 meeting of al-Qaeda operatives in Malaysia?
I don't believe they did.
All right. So we still don't know in June of 2001 what the CIA has known for 15 months.
Now, that's huge, right? That's really damning. That the CIA intentionally withheld from the FBI information about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi being in the country. Now, according to Richard Clark, the head of the National Counterterrorism Security Council under the Bush and Clinton administrations, he basically told Ray Nolashilsky and John Duffy that he thinks that the CIA did this so they could flip them. Because years prior, Cofer Black, the director of the Counterterrorism Center, couldn't believe that the CIA didn't have operatives inside al-Qaeda, and he wanted to have informants. So I'm not going to dismiss that claim that the reason why they didn't tell the FBI was because they were trying to build them as informants. Now, this also could lead to a much more nefarious conspiracy. Something I can't dismiss is that they knew what these guys were going to do, and they didn't want the FBI to screw it up. And is that a rational conspiracy? I don't think so. I mean, that's going to take more than just, my words, of course, but we don't want to have evidence of that. So it's just speculation.
Director Mueller, after Mihdhar and Hazmi were placed on the watch list by the CIA on August 23rd now, 2001. Now they are on the watch list. It's August. It's less than a month before September 11th. The FBI opened an investigation on Mihdhar, but not on Hazmi. Why did the FBI, why did you not try to locate Hazmi?
My
No,
understanding is
I think that's not true. In fact, after the FBI is told that both men are in the country, I forgot the name of the agent. I always forget this guy's name. It was a young agent out of the FBI that was told to start looking for Khalid al-Nawaf al-Hazmi in the country. And basically, they ran their names in the database tip-off and didn't come up. And they didn't know where they were. It's trying to find a needle in a haystack.
that the information related to Mr. Hazmi was included in the file of Mihdhar and that efforts were made to locate both of them.
And it wasn't a criminal investigation by the FBI, it was information. So that's why this one agent, whose name I can't remember, basically didn't have the necessary resources to really find where these two guys are. But even if he did find them, it was basically information gathering. It wasn't a criminal investigation. In other words, he wouldn't have had the approval of either, conducting further monitoring or wiretapping them or arresting them.
Your understanding is that there's an effort made to locate Hazmi?
Let me just check. My understanding.
Okay. All right, I think that's something different from what is in our report, because the New York agent was asked to open an investigation on Mihdhar, not on both.
Well,
But,
my
okay.
understanding is that we made an effort to identify and locate both individuals regardless of whether or not the file may have been
Mueller's
opened
right
under
here.
one as opposed to the other.
All right. Director Mueller, without alluding to names, I want to talk to you about the individuals that were mentioned in the Phoenix Memorandum. There were 10 individuals that were the subject
More
of
about
a...
let me fill you in about the Phoenix Memorandum if you're not familiar. FBI agent out of Phoenix named Ken Williams, who I've interviewed. If you want to go learn more about the Phoenix Memo, watch that episode on the Darkened Hour. He's one of my favorite guests. Basically, in 1998, 97, Ken Williams developed an informant in the Islamic community. His name is Henry Allen III, and he was an Islamic convert, a businessman. He had met Yasser Arafat and of the leader of the Palestine Liberalization Organization in the 1980s, and was very proactive in the Palestinian cause in Israel. And this gave him a wide range of contacts in the Islamic community. A lot of people knew who Henry Allen was. Well, according to Ken Williams, he started getting information about radical fundamentalists, people like Abu Sayyaf. Abu Sayyaf was a radical fundamentalist who was basically who was helping to influence radical Arabs in flight schools. Arizona is also home to most flight schools in the country. And this information was pertinent in helping open up a case, a file on one individual named Zachariah Subra, who became the lead man in the investigation of the Phoenix Memo. Now, also some history. Hani Hanjour, who's the alleged hijacker pilot of Flight 77, which crashed at the Pentagon, went to the University of Arizona to study engineering in 1992. And he stood there till 1996. He took a residency there, and he was known to Allen, not too much, but he knew him. But there was another informant that was, I don't think it was known to Ken Williams, but there was another informant named Orky Collins, who knew Hani Hanjour and knew Zachariah Subra and these people. And he was feeding them information, the FBI, about Hani Hanjour being a weak Muslim. He wasn't, much like, the others involved with the 9/11 attacks. These weren't real Muslims, like pious Muslims. They're Wahhabis. and they basically don't read the Quran. These are people that, believe in the Hadiths and the Hadith scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah. So, there's information coming from the FBI, and so this would help shape or form the Phoenix memo regarding the investigation into Zachariah Subra. Ken Williams actually went to Zachariah Subra's house once with another agent and actually saw pictures of Osama bin Laden and other radical fundamentalists in this guy's house. And this guy basically was right out saying that the United States should be attacked and for their friendship with Israel, and basically giving money to the Zionists in Israel, and basically, basically just acting like a lunatic. Ken Williams was like, we got to start monitoring this guy. This guy's dangerous. Well, Ken Williams actually was taken off for counterterrorism and was told to track a infamous arsonist in Arizona. And when he came back to counterterrorism in the summer of 2001, he released on I think it was July 10th of 2001, the Phoenix memo.
UBL, Osama bin Laden related investigation. How many of those 10? None of those now were hijackers, but some of them were standbys, perhaps, sleepers, perhaps, ready to participate, perhaps.
We have no evidence of that,
All right,
Senator.
how many of them, in your findings, in your investigation, how many of the 10 people listed in the Phoenix report were part of the bin Laden conspiracy?
My recollection, we have subsequently identified one of those as being associated with al-Qaeda. Let me just check 1 second.
I don't know if that's Zachariah Subra.
I would, I have not checked. It's a question I am not, I did not necessarily anticipate, so I have not gone and checked whether or not the investigations in each of the other 9. One I have in my mind was associated, we subsequently came to find, was associated with al-Qaeda. As to the other 9, I don't believe we've found that they have, any one of them has been associated with al-Qaeda, but I would have to check to make absolutely certain.
This is a very critical fact. You've got a Phoenix memo. You got 10 people listed by that FBI agent. You have the visit to the apartment house. You've got bin Laden pictures all over the apartment. You've got the agent saying this should be shared with the CIA. It wasn't shared with the CIA, that information. You got 10 people named as...
Actually, in the memo, it actually lists there was a couple of FBI agents. It was not, it was an information cable, right? So, or as it calls the CIR, Central Intelligence Report, right? So this went to John O'Neill. It went to the Radical Fundamentalist Unit, Dave Frasca in Minnesota, a couple of others, but it wasn't sent all over the FBI. It wasn't a national cable.
Going to flight schools, great deal of suspicion.
Well,
and okay.
I think that is reading into that memorandum more than is there. We absolutely had an investigation going on an individual, a principal individual, and other associates. But in terms of, I think you have to take each of those individuals.
Listen, the cable was very direct. It warned of a high number of radical fundamentalist training at flight schools. And the FBI, and the memo, Ken Williams was asserting that the FBI, under Director Mueller, should take steps in investigating at certain flight schools here in Arizona who these people were. And Mueller didn't even read the cable until after 9/11. George Bush, the president of the United States, didn't even know it existed until 2002. So John O'Neill didn't even read the memo. So you have a lot of these people that didn't even read this memo. And it warned of the danger of radical fundamentalists in the mid-1990s training at flight schools. And the one person I mentioned, Abu Sayyaf, actually was a radical fundamentalist that was training people like Subra in bomb making, and was seen by Henry Allen blowing up like practice bombs and whatnot in the desert. So, and nobody took action on this. Nobody.
And weigh the evidence against each of those individuals.
I agree.
All of them were attending flight schools.
I agree. According to our information, as of May of 2002, 4 of those were under bin Laden-related investigations. Do you have any different information from that?
I would have to go back and determine. It may well be that they are the subjects under bin Laden. In other words, we could open a file and in the file identify the individual as possibly an associate or a subject that should be investigated for the possibility of being associated with bin Laden, but that is far different than having evidence and information that the person is in fact a member of al-Qaeda or associated
How
with
many
bin
are
Laden.
still under investigation for a bin Laden-related matter?
Out of that Phoenix memorandum?
Yes.
At least 3.
I think this is highly significant information that you should be on top of. This, okay.
Well, Senator,
I'll just leave it at
we
that.
have a number of investigations going around the country.
No, I'm talking about that
in
Phoenix
Phoenix,
memo. I'm
well-
talking about the Phoenix memo. Let me ask both of you. I've asked you, Director Mueller, to release the Phoenix memo to make it public. But redacted, and to release the Minneapolis emails redacted, and they've not yet been released publicly. Why not?
Hold on one second. Senator, to the extent that there is no classification issue, we have no objection to them being released. My understanding is they're going through declassification.
All right. I've requested you to release them some time ago, and they should be released by now.
Well, I do
One
not
of the
believe
things
necessarily that we are holding up the declassification process, Senator.
Well, then who is?
Well, I would have to check in that, but I don't.
Well,
we
the
have
committee,
we have
the
not.
committee's asked for this too, by the way. This isn't just my personal request. The committee has asked for the release of these documents, redacted, made available to the public. If we want to change things, the way things operate around here, we're going to have to be open,
Yeah.
and we're going to have to hold some people accountable.
Yeah.
Last question.
Amen.
Director Tenet, how many people have been held accountable for failures?
I haven't held anybody accountable yet, sir.
Director Mueller, how many people have been held accountable for failures?
Well, it depends on your definition of accountable,
You-
but I would say that I have not held somebody accountable in the sense of either disciplining or firing somebody.
All right.
I have made changes in the result as a result of what this committee has found, and as a result of what we found in our investigation of what we did well and what we did not do well in the days and the months prior to September 11th.
If changes are going to be real and are going to stick, in addition to all the structural changes that you've talked about and all of the other things which you've described, we need openness.
Mhm.
We need documents to be released, which should have been released by now, including the Phoenix memo and the Minneapolis emails. We've waited a year now for those. And I believe people who failed in their responsibilities have got to be held accountable.
Yeah.
This is not a matter of scapegoating. This is a matter of accountability. There's been, I believe, too little effort made to pinpoint the responsibility. You don't even know the names of the people who are responsible for failures, and no holding people accountable. We're not going to have real change unless we have that.
Right.
And I'll close with that.
May I respond to that, Senator?
I think you should.
Can I respond to that?
It's up to the chair, but I'd be happy to have
But when it comes to accountability, I mean, you take something like the Phoenix memorandum that came back into headquarters. There were 2 analysts and 2 separate units that looked at that. The procedures in place at that time did not require the unit chief or the section chief to review that particular memorandum. Now, I am not going to take in an analyst who is doing what she or he is supposed to do under those procedures and hold that person, quote, accountable.
I'm not suggesting you should. Only the
But
people
what I-
who you find failed. I'm not suggesting that if someone didn't fail, you hold them accountable. It's where someone, in your judgments, have failed.
Right.
There should be some accountability. That's all that I'm suggesting.
But going back to accountability, it is important, I think, to recognize that we have to put into place procedures which assure accountability. And one of the things I mentioned in My opening statement was the requirement that the accountability be at headquarters as opposed to not being diffused in the field. So I think we are addressing accountability appropriately so.
I would ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, that my list of the CIA failures and the FBI failures relative to these matters be placed in the record at this time.
What's even more damning is the fact that here you have an intelligence agency as big as the CIA, who are basically aware of certain issues and information regarding known al-Qaeda operatives. And there was an intentional act in not sharing this information with the FBI or the State Department. And nobody was held accountable. This is what Carl Levin was talking about. How could nobody be fired for this, reprimanded? Nobody was ever. In fact, George Tenet was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Alfredo Ampakowski was the station chief in Afghanistan. No, I'm sorry, Richard Blee was. Richard Blee, which is the most prized position in the CIA regarding station chiefs. So, many other people got raises in their job structure other than being reprimanded or fired. And the one agency that seemed to skate away from any type of inquiry was the NSA, and the director was sitting right there, Michael Hayden, next to George Tenet, to his left. And the NSA is the lead agency in regards to anything related to bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Why? It's because they were monitoring bin Laden's satellite phone since the 1990s, and also that house in Yemen, the al-Qaeda communications hub. What do you think they were talking about on those phones? Well, the NSA would know. And if you have, let's just say, for example, let's hypothesize that they heard about the 9/11 attacks, and there was a decision made by the NSA or CIA to work with foreign intelligence, such as Israel and Saudi Arabia, to make sure that they conduct intelligence, signals and human intelligence regarding the people that are involved with the 9/11 attacks from the Malaysia summit meeting, and also from another cell located in Hamburg, Germany, in which the Israelis and CIA knew about, as well as the German authorities, like the LFV. And they all came to the United States. And there was a coordinated effort between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the CIA and the NSA to monitor these people. But somehow, some information was not shared with these agencies, who already have a nefarious agenda of just keeping this in-house and not sharing it with anybody else. As you can see, this could lead to a multitude of different variations of conspiracy, whether they wanted this to happen, whether they manipulated the project. If they knew about the operation, let's say they could wire up the World Trade Center for bombs, or allow for NORAD to not intercept these jets while they were in the air, making sure they hit their designations. So there's a lot more questions than answers, but we're not going to get anywhere if we don't start asking the right questions. See you in the next video. Have a good night, everybody.